Jeremy, good morning to you. Always a pleasure speaking with you here on Live Now.
Good morning, Gina.
So a lot of legal things I just mentioned, and that's why you're here, to make it make sense, right? People were not expecting this decision to come down, and then the timing of it. We saw what happened at former President Donald Trump's campaign rally over the weekend, and then day one of the RNC yesterday. I mean, the timing couldn't be ever more perfect for him.
Really big news cycle, and yeah, some good news for him yesterday. Like you said, there's probably 3 or 4 different ways that Jack Smith and his team or the Justice Department can try to solve this issue. But it's a pretty controversial opinion by Judge Cannon, essentially saying that the U.S. Senate needed to approve Jack Smith. That is an argument that I think a lot of people have made that have been prosecuted by independent counsel or special counsel over the years. Nobody's been successful with it until the other day. So I definitely think that this is the beginning and not the end of this round of litigation on this issue.
And Jeremy, we know that special counsel Jack Smith can appeal. What would that appeal process look like? If he did appeal, what does that mean?
One of his options is appealing, and the Justice Department, what they can do is, so Judge Cannon is the trial court judge. So you got 3 levels of federal courts. You got the U.S. Supreme Court, you've got an intermediate court of appeals, and then you've got Judge Cannon. So the intermediate court of appeals is going to be the 11th Circuit in Florida. So the Justice Department, probably their most likely route here is to just take it to the 11th Circuit. There is a very strong chance that the 11th Circuit overrules Judge Cannon, reinstates the indictment, and brings it back to her. But you would anticipate that Trump and his team would take it from the 11th Circuit to the U.S. Supreme Court if that's the case. So that's probably the most likely avenue of appeal. And then the U.S. Supreme Court, we don't know what they're going to do, obviously. Justice Clarence Thomas, in the Trump immunity opinion, sort of opined about the special counsel in one of his concurrences. The word of the day is dicta. I'll get to that here in a minute. But Judge Thomas, in some of what we call dicta, which is superfluous language in an opinion, talked about this very issue and kind of hinted that he would be okay with gutting the ability for the Attorney General to appoint a special prosecutor.
You know, Jeremy, I'm so glad you brought that up. Many of the viewers were actually wanting to know what you just alluded to. You know, we saw what happened with that SCOTUS decision, the Supreme Court of the United States, as related to presidential immunity. And for some, they were thinking that kind of set the stage for what we saw happen as far as it relates to this classified documents case.
That's right. And to go back to the term dicta, so that's a real hardcore law school term that basically think of dicta like this. So when a judge issues an opinion, 30 pages, right? Let's say it's a murder opinion, and the judge says murder is bad, murder is wrong. Here's all the instances where we don't like murder, but we're going to throw this conviction out in this case because X, Y, and Z. So what the judge is doing is the judge is kind of politically, if you will, or maybe just sort of laying out that, look, I'm not in favor of murder, but we have to let this person go for this reason. All that language is what we call dicta. All the things that are just sort of that superfluous extra verbiage is dicta. Judge Cannon spent about 20 pages. She wrote a 93-page opinion, as you said. About 20 of those pages were dedicated to her. The U.S. Supreme Court in the Richard Nixon case said the appointment of a special prosecutor is fine, or an independent prosecutor is fine, that the Senate does not have to confirm them. And Judge Cannon spent about 20 pages of her opinion saying that's dicta, saying I don't have to follow that because that's dicta. But again, like I said before, nobody has really ever agreed with that position. 4 folks tried to upend Robert Mueller's appointment as the special prosecutor using that same argument. And even a Trump appointee said, no, under the U.S. v. Nixon doctrine, that's fine. So Judge Cannon's really kind of, her opinion is going to get criticized a lot for that reason. And I think she knew that. And I think that's why she spent about 20 pages claiming that this was dicta. And then what Clarence Thomas said in his opinion in the Trump immunity case was definitely dicta, because he had what was called a concurring opinion, which means that it's he votes with the majority, but what he's writing is somewhat different.
Thank you so much for breaking that down. And another aspect I wanted you to shed some light on is what this case means for the Justice Department in general, because with those allegations that Smith's office was being funded by the Justice Department and now this case being dismissed, what does that mean for the Justice Department in the future or even now?
There's a handful of quick fixes here. Okay. So appealing this case is not necessarily the only avenue for the Justice Department here. They could hire Jack Smith and think about it like this. So when you have the executive branch, right, contains every member of the cabinet. That's the Department of Labor, the Department of Justice, as in this case, the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy. All of these people are what are called principals. But we also have a concept that's called inferior employees, which is not my term. That's what they're called under the statute. And inferior employees don't have to be approved by the Senate. So think of the Justice Department in terms of, you've got Merrick Garland at the top. He's got to be confirmed by the Senate. You've got 94 district offices, Dallas for the Northern District of Texas, Miami, the Southern District of Florida, the Southern District of New York, that's New York City, a very big department. If you had to appoint every single U.S. prosecutor and U.S. attorney, that would be kind of silly, I think. And that's sort of what the special prosecutor, that's what the Department of Justice was arguing, was that, look, these are inferior employees. We don't have to get each and every person at the Justice Department to be approved by the Senate, right? We have the right to hire people who work the front door, people who work in the cafeteria that don't have to be subject to that. And your rank and file U.S. attorneys. One solution that they could do is they could just hire Jack Smith and just say, okay, now he works here. Now he's under Merrick Garland's direct supervision. The political blowback in that is that now you've got an argument that, okay, President Biden, before you were not prosecuting a political opponent because this was detached. It was Jack Smith. Now you are. But that would fix the problem very quickly. So now they're going to have a decision to make at the Justice Department of just how aggressive do they want to be in solving this issue. They could reindict. They could have Jack Smith just prosecute the case. They could reindict. They could try to reindict this in Washington, D.C. Then they would get accused of judge shopping. So the question to answer what you were asking me about the Justice Department in the future, how aggressive do they want to be in dealing with this? I think they probably just appeal it to the 11th Circuit. They might be afraid of Clarence Thomas and they might be afraid of what the U.S. Supreme Court does. So they may try that quick fix route too. We'll see.
Jeremy, I thoroughly appreciate your expertise and analysis. We always have great conversations here on Live Now. Thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything we need to be keeping a watchful eye on? Again, many people thinking it's now over. It's not. Again, that appeal can happen, as you so eloquently put it.
It's not over. It's just getting started. And the question is just what is the Justice Department? How are they going to combat this? And Judge Cannon has really, I think, opened herself up to a good deal of criticism. She may ultimately be right. And let's be clear about that. Justice Thomas on the Supreme Court basically threw out in dicta, I think that this appointment is questionable. Now, I don't know that it was germane to the Trump opinion, which is why it was sort of buried where it was. But the problem for Judge Cannon is that what she essentially did, and what you can argue that she did, is that when you're that bottom rung judge, you don't get to overrule the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court gets to overrule the Supreme Court, and they may ultimately do that. But for the moment, I think it's a temporary victory. And I think this is going to rattle around in the courts for some time. If there's good news for Donald Trump, it just delays this thing even further, which is, I think their goal has been met to make sure that this does not come before the election. There's no conceivable way, obviously, that it will. At the moment, it's dismissed.
Well, always a pleasure, Jeremy. Thank you again for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. You enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.